My name is Janus. I work here as a mobile dev. I'm also a Kotlin enthusiast, and I'm especially enamored with bleeding edge technologies, which is why we're talking about Kotlin Native tonight. So, to give you some background, I understand there has been some presentations with this group regarding Kotlin multi-platform for iOS and Android in the mobile space. That's not what I'm talking about tonight. I'm actually talking about the dream of being able to write Kotlin code for your Mac or your Linux box or Windows, if you're into that, and whether it actually works. Okay, go to my next slide. So, you may have heard, if you've paid attention to Kotlin Native at all, that it's painful. You have to run things from the command line, and you have to use an IDE that maybe you're not familiar with, and things break, and then it doesn't work, and it's really not performant. My goal here tonight is to tell you you can forget that. The tooling for Kotlin Native is wonderful. There's some caveats. There may be a few dragons along the way. But a lot of the problems that you've heard about in the past are just fixed. Where do we stand right now? The purpose for talking about this right now is because, according to JetBrains, Kotlin Native is feature complete, as they say, and stable. It's in beta. You're shaking your head. I'm kind of with you on that, but as they say, that's what they say. They're saying it's in beta, that's the status of it. It's no longer pre-release. I noticed that they changed the wording on their documentation, and at least they're claiming that what you get now is what you're going to get when they release it, presumably to production. Now, I want to make a point here. When they say feature complete, I was a little fooled by that at first, because apparently what they don't mean is that the features are complete. Because they're not. What they mean is that they have completed all the features they're going to complete before they release the thing. So now it seems would be a good time to at least take a look at it and see, does it actually work? So just to give you some background on how they've implemented this. So they didn't go and write a bespoke compiler for every platform for Kotlin. What they did instead was they're leveraging an existing tool chain called LLVM. My understanding is if you are familiar with the Mac world, you probably heard of this already. Actually hadn't. But apparently the deal is that LLVM takes essentially a computer language, as they call it, an intermediate representational, essentially computer language, and compiles it down to the target platforms that you want. And so what Kotlin Native does is they compile down to this intermediate representation, and then they use LLVM to go the rest of the way down to your Mac or your Linux box or Windows. That said, I'd like to take you on a live coding demo, because I can. So here is a standard version of IntelliJ. Nothing special. I didn't even put in any weird plugins or anything like that. I go to create new project. Take a moment. And as you can see, Kotlin Native is an option. I understand this wasn't always the case. There used to be some real pain points, but now there's a wizard. So let's do it. Let me give it a clever name. Hope you can all see that. Oh, you can actually see better than I can. All right, that was pretty much not painless, huh? So if you followed along at home, you're now a Kotlin Native developer. It's really that easy. And apparently it wasn't always. So what you get here is a Gradle-based project. It includes this plugin. There are a number of plugins, by the way. Even down this road as well. There are a number of plugins. For the moment, at least, you want to go with this one that comes out of the box when you go for a Kotlin Native through the wizard. There's one that references Conan, and I saw a few others. You maybe don't want to go down that path. So it gives you this plugin. You'll see here definitions for where your sources, what your target platforms are, and then a run program task. So let's try it. Oops. Okay, that's going to take a while, and that's my next point. Apparently, they have not focused so much to this point on performance. Although they've been really straight about that, so you know I can't be mean to them about it. What they are saying is they focused on the features first, and presumably now, one would think as we speak, they're working on performance. So in this case, it took, what does it say, 17 seconds to compile. This is actually just a, oh, I didn't show you the code. Let me pull that up. It's just a hello world thing that comes pre-canned out of the box. I can tell you that I tried writing a hello world in C for comparison, and there is no comparison. It's done compiling almost before I click the button. So the performance really isn't there yet. But again, they're working on it, so not to be mean. That said, I compared the executables. So I wrote a hello world in C. It was 9K. Hello world in Kotlin was 963K. Okay, that's a thing, right? If you wanted to do this for the purpose of like super efficiency in small modules, maybe not yet. We might want to give them a chance to work through this to get that fixed. So that was just something you need to be aware of. Keep your eye open for it. Hopefully they will eventually get that fixed. Okay, now let me show you some things that work and some things unfortunately don't work. Here is something that works, which will make you all very happy, I think. Unit tests work. So I go to my Gradle, my verification, I can run that test, and that works. And I did some experimenting with that. I tried to make some failing tests, passing tests, see if I could fool it into not working. And as far as I can tell, you've got unit tests. So I was pretty thrilled about that. I wasn't able to make it break. I understand, as Paul has pointed out, code coverage may not, the code coverage tools may not be fully there. And you had some multi-platform issues with code coverage. But in terms of just running unit tests and getting them to run against my Kotlin code, this was super easy.
Quick question, what test framework is being used here? Where is the attest presentation coming from? What test framework is being used if you open up the import?
Sure, I'll open this up.
Okay,
yeah. Now, now that I showed you something that works, let me show you something that's a little disappointing. So I put a breakpoint there. I click my little debug guy, and that actually doesn't work. It didn't stop at my breakpoint. It didn't happen. Apparently, at least for IntelliJ, that's not working. The folks at JetBrains know this. One would hope they're working on it. I have heard rumors that you can get debug to work if you use Kotlin Native with CLion, but why would you? Unless you're into CLion. But at least for IntelliJ, this does not fly, which is unfortunate. Okay, so that was your basic intro to how easy it is now to be a Kotlin Native developer. it's absolutely a no-brainer. I recommend you all try it. Kotlin code, as far as I can tell, seems to work just fine, the basic core language. Some comments, I'll get to that in a minute. The initial answer to the question posed, can a JVM programmer write native code with this? The answer is pretty much, to a point, yes. And I think you'll find it satisfying. Now, having said that, let's take this a step further. So I decided to put this through a test. I would take this little game. So I wrote this game in Kotlin, with the exception of I used like a JPanel to paint the graphics and keylogger, but you can see it's basically a ripoff of asteroids, and there's an alien that flies around and all that. And, aside from those two things, it's all written in Kotlin. So, in theory, if Kotlin Native works the way they say it does, I should have been able to just copy the code out of there, paste it in, and it should just work, right? And I thought, well, this will also be a good opportunity to learn some Kotlin UI stuff. I figured I'd learn NoFX, maybe incorporate that. It'll be a cool thing. So, okay, this was what I got.
Janus, when you say it's written in Kotlin, you mean it's written in Kotlin JVM?
Yes, I'm sorry. Right. Yes. So, yeah, it's Kotlin JVM game that I wrote, kind of a silly little asteroids thing. So here's what I got when I wrote it, when I copied and pasted it into Kotlin Native. Okay, so you can see it's clearly the same game, right? As far as the Kotlin code worked, it actually was a copy and paste, like more than I even expected it to be. But as you can see, there's something missing. I can't quite put my finger on it, right? It's, yeah, it's not so very gooey.
I like that person better.
I have to admit, well, anyway, I do have a kind of a warm spot for how that got done, but I'll get to that in a minute. I'll go into some detail on how that happened.
JPanel was copy and paste. So you could only copy and paste the order.
Oh, right. Just the Kotlin code.
You have to write your
Right. So I had to expect that I would do a Kotlin UI, and that didn't work. So this gets back to the point where they say that it is feature complete. There are some big pieces missing, and this is the first piece of genuinely bad news I have for you on this topic. There are 3 pieces of bad news I have for you, and this is the first one. There are some big pieces that they have not implemented, UI being one of them. That's not trivial. There are a couple of other things they haven't implemented, like file I/O. That was also a bit of a pain point. I'm sorry,
so I didn't read for native for a while, but when I did, a year ago, I would say, what they said is that you can actually integrate with the C library.
Yes, that's where we're going.
So this is where you will go for all this file access and all that. Of course, they should provide the wrapper standard wrapper for that, but at least for now.
Exactly, and you've given me the perfect segue. Which is that while I acknowledge that is bad news, and I will not blame you if you decide to not play with Kotlin Native as a result, if you find that too unpleasant, the folks at JetBrains have offered a solution. Let's see if I can, oh, I've lost my cursor. Oh, there I am. Okay, so the answer is C. What they've done, and I personally think this is really clever, and I hope I can encourage you all to try this. They have made Kotlin Native interoperable with C libraries pretty much in the same way Kotlin is interoperable with Java on the JVM. And it's beautiful. Okay, it's beautiful. That said, it's not perfect. Okay. I am going to have to give you some bad news along the way, but I'm hoping I can convince you that they're nice little friendly dragons and that you will want to take them home as a pet. So with that in mind, let's go back to IntelliJ. And I would like to perform a magic trick for you. Let's call this one C libraries. Okay, so it'll set up a nice little project for us, just like the other one. It's way too easy. We'll go to the code. Now watch this. Oh. Now, assuming that I've typed that correctly, this is going to work. So what did I just do here? I'm executing a function from a C library called POSIX, P-O-S-I-X, which is a commonly available library that gives you a whole bunch of cool things like file I/O, like threading. It's available on Mac, Linux, and OS, Windows, which is important. I'll get why that's important in a minute. And you can pretty much use it as if it was Kotlin. Like, that just worked. You know, I didn't have to do anything special. I just put it in there, included the import, and it worked. And that, I think, is really cool. If you're not into using C libraries and that sort of thing, I certainly understand. But if you're game, give this a try. So there is one little caveat. There always is. For the most part, I have found that these C libraries are crazy easy to use. Like, it's completely a no-brainer. There is one little glitch, and that's strings. Okay, so strings in C are not quite the same as strings in Kotlin. So if let's see, try this. There is a, I think I'm typing this correctly. Okay, you'll see that it doesn't like that. This is a string concatenation function.
Why would you do that?
For demonstration, that's all, just for demonstration.
Because
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. So, oh, sure. Okay. So StringCat is, I think, also part of POSIX, pretty sure. It just concatenates two strings. So it doesn't like one of my strings, even though that looks like just a regular old string. So I don't know if you can see, but that's actually what it's looking for. C values ref byte bar. Yeah, that's pretty ugly. And that's actually really the only ugliness that I encountered while doing this. That said, the folks at JetBrains are aware of this, and they've included some extension functions and properties to make this particular problem a little bit easier. So for instance, if I want to take this string, which is just a regular, Kotlin string, and use it in this context where it wants that creepy pointer thing, there is an extension property that they've created that will convert it to that. And actually, in this case, I think it's a different library. I think it's, which one is it? Oh, it's Kotlin X. There you go. I'm sorry?
You often enter over C string, is it Kotlin for?
I want Kotlin X. I can see what I need. Kotlin X has center up. So it's this. That's the guy. If assuming I spell it right. Yeah. So anyway, so that's the only caveat with these C libraries is the strings can get a little wonky. And it's a bit of a pain point, but they have put in some stuff to make it easier for you. Sure, what's up?
The only thing is, I'm kind of surprised that, for example, text structs.
It's the only thing I've found so far. That's the only thing I've found so far.
Okay.
Okay, so there may well be others. Certainly possible.
Because I'm wondering how text structs would be used.
You get that sort of stuff when you have to deal with things that are without probably originally
Yes. Yeah.
so you need something to deal with a pointer or
Take time.
if you deal with things that like original language module stuff, you get
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so
Also work with C++ by chance, or just C?
no.
Because the only one question is popping up.
Apparently, I haven't tried it, I have to admit. But apparently none of this works with C++ from what I've heard.
Okay.
Let's just see. So now let's take a little look under the hood to find out why this behaves like it was Kotlin. Because it is Kotlin. So they create Kotlin bindings for all of these functions within the C library. And what you're looking at here, yeah, good, you can see that, is a .knm file. It's Kotlin Nancy Mary. And where you will find that is here. Now, I probably shouldn't admit this out loud, but I almost never look here. Frankly, I just don't. Now is a really good time to look in your external libraries. So with Kotlin Native, let's expand this so you can see what we've got here. You get a whole bunch, at least on Mac OS, and I'll get that to that in a minute, a whole bunch of these platform libraries available to you. So for instance, here's POSIX. And down here, you'll see one that looks like standard library. That's actually not a C thing, although you might think it is. That's actually where you'll find your Kotlin. So in here, if you want to see what actually is supported and what isn't, you can find it there. You'll probably also notice this. Now, I'm not a macOS developer. In fact, that was sort of the point of this talk, because I'm just a JVM guy. So I don't really know how to code natively on a Mac. But my understanding is this AppKit thing includes a pretty robust UI for the Mac. And you can use it as if it was Kotlin. It just works. There's a video on YouTube of one of the JetBrains guys doing a live coding demo where he only put it out there about 3-4 weeks ago, where he opens up pretty much a blank, just decided he uses the wizard, open up pretty much a blank application, and then proceeded to copy and paste like 80 or 100 lines of this called NS Windows, I think. Again, I'm not a Mac developer, but apparently it was that, and it just worked. It was amazing. It wasn't terribly informative, but it was amazing that it would work like that.
But this means that this application, even though it would be native, would work on the Mac.
Right, right. And you're bringing me to my next perfect segue. Thank you.
But if you bring this up on Windows, you'll see all the Windows libraries, not Mac libraries,
I'm pretty sure you can see Windows libraries right here.
on the Mac.
Yeah.
Well,
I-
we'll get to that in a minute, actually. Yeah. So what I'd like to do next, is that the right one? Yes, it is actually show you the little game that I ported. In particular, I'd like to show you the native code. Kotlin is, again, just kind of boring old Kotlin. It all worked. Worked better than I expected it to, really, the Kotlin code. It was beautiful. For the UI, I chose a library called curses. It's sometimes, I think, called ncurses, sometimes called pcurses. It's curses. I think it's a wonderful library because it's so simple and you can create character-based UIs with like no learning curve. So if the lack of a UI is going to hold you back, I'd like to introduce you to curses because it really just made it too easy. So for that reason, and also to reveal a few more of the caveats, I'd like to show you how the asteroid scheme actually got implemented. As you can see, it looks as if this was just Kotlin, which it's not, but it acts that way. What you do with curses, you initialize the screen, you create a game window. Next, I just set the input to make sure it wouldn't echo and just set the cursor. There's a neat little thing called half delay. And what it does is when you call for input, it will wait this many hundreds of milliseconds before proceeding. So when it gets to the bottom of my game loop, it waits for 100 milliseconds, and if I don't type anything, it proceeds, and then proceeds and waits again. It allowed me to write that program really simply. I mean, it was kind of a no-brainer. You can see what you do here is you clear your window. I put a nice border around it. That's what this box does. The game actions actually would paint the various things onto it, and then you refresh it. And boy, that's everything pretty much you need to know about using curses. It's really that easy. So I encourage you to try this. It's just crazy easy. That said, there is a bit of a little dragon down here, which is when you're done, you need to do this. Okay, and I realize the phrase memory leaks is the last thing in the world you ever wanted to hear in your professional life, which is probably why you're JVM programmers in the first place. If you go into the world of Kotlin Native, here's the deal. According to JetBrains, if you're writing in Kotlin, you get garbage collection for free, which is beautiful, as long as you stick to Kotlin. But the minute you go beyond Kotlin, you're kind of in the Wild West. You have to handle your memory on your own. Now, fortunately, the folks at JetBrains have compassion for JVM developers, and they gave us a new keyword, which I highly recommend you use. It's this one, memscoped. This is pretty much made for JVM developers, I think. So if you put this on your function, my understanding is it does pretty much exactly what the name implies. It keeps track of the memory within that scope and frees it when it's done. So don't be too freaked out by the memory thing. It's manageable. JetBrains was aware of it. You know, they gave us this memscope thing. I should point out, by the way, that one place, and I found this after trial and error, one place it doesn't work is for some reason on your main method. I couldn't even compile. I don't know why. I found that out through trial and error. It wasn't. I didn't learn that from any documentation or anything. It just wouldn't compile. So it may seem odd that I went to the trouble of creating an extra function to actually run the game loop. That was why I did it, so I could use the memscope. I'm sorry.
So it's probably a return type thing. So that's good.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
It has a return type that's on.
Huh.
Can't return it as.
Right. Yeah, I kind of became surprised. I was, oh, why can't I do that? What's everywhere else? Okay, so That said, that was the second piece of bad news, which is that you have to handle your own memory when you go beyond Kotlin. Now the third bit of bad news. So I wrote this little game. I'm sorry?
How many bits of that?
Only 3. This is the last one. It's the last one. So I wrote this little game. I was like, oh, this is great. I was actually kind of enjoying the character-based version a little more than the GUI version in some ways. And I thought, okay, well, I'll take this off my Mac and I'll run it on my Linux box because my personal computer is a Linux box. And so I fired it up and it would not compile. Okay, and this was a little heartbreaking. So you saw this list. Let's see if I can pull it up again. This big, huge, awesome list of platform libraries that you get on Mac OS. Here's the list on Linux. Okay, that was pretty heartbreaking. You get POSIX, you get Kotlin, or you don't get a whole lot more than that. So Kotlin Native is great, but it's just way heavily leaning towards Mac at this point. That was actually a tough one. I didn't even know at first what to do about that. I almost gave up on it at that point. That said, like everything else, there's a workaround, although I will admit the workaround for this one is not as easy and pretty as the others. Although it's kind of cool in its implications. So here's what you can do. You can add libraries to this. And I haven't done it yet, but that's what I intend to do. I'm going to add the Linux versions and curses to this, and I'm sure I'll be able to compile just fine. Excuse me, the cool part of that is not just that you can add more libraries, but you can write your own, right? If you're inclined to write C, you can write your own and include them, you know, in your application. That said, I want to give a shout out to this fellow. So what happened was, in my effort to get this to work, I made the unfortunate mistake of following the standard documentation. And after losing many hours that I will never get back in my life, I came to realize it's out of date. It doesn't work. But this fellow has a website called learnkotlinnative.com. He's an enthusiast. And I gotta say, following his instructions, I got it to work. So at least for the moment, until JetBrains gets all their documentation, I guess, up to speed, I found this to be more useful than the official ones. I actually got to work with this. And he has also some examples on GitHub that work. So a little bit of a pain point there. I guess they're still maybe not getting there entirely with the documentation. So after a fair amount of pain, as I said, I followed this guy's instructions, and it finally works just fine. Actually, you can add libraries, and it's a beautiful thing. Okay, so that comes to the end. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope I have at least convinced you to try Kotlin Native and haven't freaked you out too much with memory leaks and C libraries and things like that. It really is worth it. And like I said, the Kotlin was like copy and paste. Sure.
Questions about the memory model? You say they wrote no garbage collector?
They wrote their own garbage collection. Is it more Swift style or more JVM style?
Yes, it is reference counting.
Oh, Paul says
Sorry?
reference counting. Yeah, I actually don't know which.
Reference counting.
Reference counting, so you have to be careful of circular references in your models and stuff? Okay. Okay. And which facilities are there in Kotlin Native for asynchronous programming? Are there threads, are there coroutines and such?
I personally have had no luck yet getting coroutines to work in Kotlin Native. If anyone else has, let me know.
And p-threads?
I can't even get the Gradle reference to work, so
It's another talk, yeah.
yeah. That was a big pain point for me. I didn't get that to work.
So I didn't ask my third question, and you address that. So it was right time also. Also, so basically, as I remember, again, what they do with the C libraries is they actually compiled header files into the interfaces. So you take any C library, and with some effort, you can actually create the wrapper for Kotlin for that. So because it's limited, I believe, because it's a standard deliverables for Linux. But definitely people will write the wrappers for all the favorite libraries.
I'm 100% confident I'll eventually have this running on Linux. Now that I found that fellow's documentation, that seems to work pretty well. I'm sure I can get it to work. Yeah, and like I said, you can write your own. I mean, how cool is that? You know?
Yeah, thank you. I definitely will come back to that and we'll try this now.
Question? Okay.
Cool. So thank you very much to Janus and Daniel. So just a quick little reminder. So we still have our JetBrains IDE license raffle, which not too many people have stuck their names into. So we can hang out a couple more minutes, and if anyone wants to add their name to the bin over here, please do.